You were talking about these 5% differentiators, and you mentioned if you were in the job market, you might be able to leverage some of those as part of your post, whether you are, an executive or a VP or any of those kinds of things.
It's tough to stand out on LinkedIn, period. But if you're trying to find a job, you are in a season of life where it may feel a little uneasy and unsettling, and you may not be able to clearly reach for those 5% differentiators. So my suggestion would be, what unique stories can you tell from successful past work experiences, but don't present them. It's not, hey, I did this really great thing at work, because you want to be the underdog. You want to share stories that help people cheer for you. And if your wound story is a news article or a magazine article, you only share the headline, but you don't share the news copy.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long, or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
So when you hear you need to be authentic, like what goes through your mind? Because there's a huge range of what that can mean. And of course, we all have our little definitions. But when we're on LinkedIn, sometimes we go too far and sometimes we don't go far enough. So I brought in the expert on this, really, literally, Holly Crawshaw. You are like a shining beacon for so many wonderful things on LinkedIn, and your following is mind-blowing. But really, like when I look at your content, I am literally riveted from one line to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And everyone wants to know. So how do you do that? I want to do that. That's why I'm taking your course. And that's why we're going to talk about it a little bit later, because I want that secret sauce. I want people to be interested in what I have to say. And part of being interesting is also being authentic.
Right.
So today we're talking about the balancing act between authenticity and oversharing in your personal stories. And so could not be any happier to have you here, and also like send you like this big virtual hug and see your cat's eyes. And I know about your 4 cats. I got that too. So
yeah. Lauren, that was a very gracious introduction. Thank you so much. But you're right. This is one of my most asked questions on LinkedIn. And, just to back up a little bit, for 18 years prior to coming to LinkedIn, I was a book ghostwriter. So this is also something that many of my book ghostwriting clients struggled with, is this idea of how much do I share? And especially on LinkedIn, how much do I share professionally, right? And part of my answer, my response every time sort of asks them, like you said, to define what they mean by sharing vulnerably. And usually it's, well, I don't want to talk about X, Y, or Z because it's going to either make somebody mad, my coworkers are going to talk about it, I'm super embarrassed by it. So a lot of times people are connecting stories of authenticity with wounds, right? And while that is very much a category, and you and I'll talk about that in just a minute, there's so many other ways to be real or be genuine or be yourself that doesn't involve unpacking the skeletons in the closet. In fact, I would highly advise against unpacking all the skeletons in your closet on LinkedIn. So when you're talking about what makes you different from other people in your category, I call those 5% differentiators. And leaning into those, that 5% that makes you different from every other person who is selling whatever you're selling, offering whatever you're offering, leading whatever you're leading. What makes you you? How would your friends describe you? How would your partner describe you? How would your children describe you? All of these things, these collective sort of idiosyncrasies. For example, I'll give you one of mine. And you already mentioned it. I'm a cat lady. If I had $1 for every cat meme, Lauren, I received in a day, I'd be a very rich woman. And I love them all. Keep them coming. I love a good cat meme. But I talk about, now my cats aren't the topic of the post, right? Because nobody really wants to read a post about my 4 Persian cats. But I really want to write that post, but nobody really wants to read it. So instead, I will casually insert little details about myself or my life in every post. Not every post needs stiff, formal language. In fact, the more casual you can be, now grammatically correct and clean, right? Effective writing, but the more casual you can be and the more tone of voice you use. I use the same words over and over again in my post. I've even made up a few words. We've named the algorithm Almeida, and the big, LinkedIn folks, we call them the LinkedIn celebrities. All of those things are very idiosyncratic to me, to my page, to my posts, to the language that I use, from, again, words that I've made up that people have now become familiar with, to the mentioning of my cats. I think every single person who comes to my page realizes quickly that I'm a single mother. People probably see my faith reflected in some of my posts because that's important to me. So again, we're unpacking what are those core sort of, what's your weird, right? What makes you different from everybody else in your field? And so that is one way people can share. Now, I wouldn't use the word vulnerable, but I would say you're giving your post voice and your personality. You're giving it life. And I think, through leveraging, first you have to understand what those are about you first. That's the first step. You have to understand those things about yourself that make you different, that make you you. And then when you leverage them, either by mentioning them in a post, or, I share a post every Sunday called Story Sunday. It's where I kind of write whatever I want to write. So that's where a lot of these 5% differentiators are introduced, and then they're perpetuated through mentioning them throughout the weeks. But that is one very simple way, especially to test the waters. If you're not used to talking about yourself or writing about yourself, if that's a great start line for you, is to start talking about, what do you do every weekend? Is there a place you go every 4th of July weekend? That would have been a great post to share that week. What is something that everybody says about you? And then tie it in somehow, right? Because you want to add value. Tie it in somehow to a bigger theme, lesson, or value add for your audience. Just the mention of it makes you that much more relatable. It almost feels like peeking a little bit behind the curtain of your life. So your 5% differentiators, that's a great place to start, understanding them and leveraging them.
So
But
I
then,
want to just wait.
oh yeah,
I want to poke this bear. I want to
please do.
get in or
Poke it.
poke that Siamese. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I can imagine that
Right,
people that are in their job search are going, yeah, nice for you. I got
right.
to button it up. I got to look professional. And at the same time, everybody's like, oh, yeah, go out there and be authentic, And so this kind of push pull between, where is the dividing line? How do I
Yeah.
know? And I love that you're talking about 5% differentiators. And what I also heard that I think is so awesome is just the sprinkling in, right? You don't need to overdose or slather it on, because that gets a little bit,
Yep.
TMI. So
Absolutely. What's the line?
bring us back to that place. And I like that you were talking about these 5% differentiators, and you mentioned, a couple of yours, and how, if you were in the job market, how you might be able to leverage some of those as part of your post, whether you are, an executive or a VP or any of those kinds of things. Do any of those kind of spark, no pun intended, spark ideas?
Yeah. So for people in a job search, I think this is probably even more critical than someone, just on LinkedIn to scale LinkedIn, because you do want to stand out. You do want to, the job market right now, Lauren, your post was so wonderful this morning. I believe it was from this morning, about the job market. It's it's tough to stand out on LinkedIn, period. But if you're trying to find a job, you are in a season of life where it may feel a little uneasy and unsettling, and you may not be able to clearly reach for those 5% differentiators. So my suggestion would be, what unique stories can you tell from successful past work experiences, but don't present them, right? It's not, hey, I did this really great thing at work, right? Because you want to be the underdog. You want to share stories that help people cheer for you. And, you could say, hey, something really unfortunate happened in my last position. Be vague, don't name names, don't. Here's what I say, and then we'll get into this a bit more later, but share the headline. If your wound story is a news article or a magazine article, you only share the headline, but you don't share the copy, right? You don't share the news copy. So I never name names. I never go into detail. I give very generic dates so people can't, not that anyone cares this much about me, but people can't do a deep dive and figure out who I'm talking about. I did have a toxic boss at one time, and it was highly, highly informed the next steps in my life and career. Many lessons learned from that relationship. And you know what? Some of it was my fault, and I have owned that. But just showing people, showing recruiters, showing hiring managers, showing CEOs that you can talk about work and yourself in a way that is very analytical, and you can apply those lessons to present day. There's so much value in that. So if you're kind of in this tailspin of, well, I'm in a job search, I got severance, so I have, 3 to 6 months, or maybe you're at that desperate point where you're like, I need something to happen now. You might not be able to define those 5% differentiators right away, because there's a lot about your identity that might feel in flux. In those situations, and I have worked with many people in job transition on their LinkedIn stuff. So in those, I say, what are your work stories? What's the best team you ever worked on? What were the qualities of that team? Who's the best leader you ever worked for? What were the qualities of that leader? And then likewise, what's the worst team you've ever been a part of? How could you have done something different to change the narrative? What did you learn from that experience? Same thing with a leader. A time that you faced adversity on the job and overcame it. 5 lessons you learned in your last job. So those are personal stories, right? Even though you're talking about work, you're saying it in a very presentive format where people are beginning to sort of get to know you and what matters to you, what makes you tick, and they're understanding that you can grow, right? Anytime you talk about adversity and overcoming, that is a prime indicator of the ability for growth. And I think that's one thing, and Lauren, you sort of alluded to this in your post, that's one thing that a lot of hiring managers are looking for is potential, right? Over pedigree. I think you use those exact words. And leaning into those stories that are professional, and still sprinkling it with those pieces of your identity that are unchanging. I believe that would be the advice I would give to anyone in a job search trying to grasp those 5% differentiators, because I know it's easier for those of us who we've sort of been doing the same thing for a really long time. Those are easier to identify, but sharing those past work stories and professional stories of client wins, even stories where you wish you had done something really different with a client or with a product or a service, whatever it is that you want to get back into. But certainly not trashing anyone's name. Highly advise against that, and not using anyone's name, and certainly not scapegoating. Listen, it could have been all this boss's fault, right? It could have been all their fault, but it's not a good look to trash anybody's name. You frame that story in, I had a leader that was not the type of leader that I would want to be. Here's the type of leader I would want to be. So that's the headline, right? I had a leader once. I would not want to be like this leader. And then the news copy is all the stuff that you don't share, like he was toxic, he was micromanaging, he never knew what he wanted. All of that stuff we don't go into. Instead, you take the positive approach in saying, here's the kind of leader I want to be, right? So there's a very careful sort of dance that and it is a line, but anytime you get into specific dates, specific names, and anytime you get too specific, too many details, Lauren, you have crossed the line, and it's not a good look. It's just not a good look. But I will say, the thing about sharing failure stories, and again, so there's these 5% differentiators, right? Then you have your personal, professional stories. Then there's this other category, a third category of ways to be vulnerable, and that's truly being vulnerable. Talking about pain, pain, or even really joyful moments in your life are difficult for some to share and feel like they're doing it in a professional way. And my rule of thumb is this. I'll give you some examples from my own content. I was on LinkedIn for 2 years before I ever talked about being a single mom, being divorced. I thought, my relationship status is none of anybody's business. My relationship status has nothing to do with my ability to be a great ghostwriter. I also thought that there's a stigma, attached to single moms. And I thought, oh, these people are going to think I'm unreliable, that I don't have childcare, that, there were a lot of very immature thought processes happening. And then the moment I started sharing that story, it attracted so many leads. And here's why. Because people stopped seeing me in a very static, this is a profile on LinkedIn that just hangs out in this digital sphere. And then they started seeing me as Holly, a human being. And there's an innate connection that happens on your screen when you are able to share some of those really hurtful, again, even really happy stories sometimes can be difficult to share because they feel very personal. These stories just provide a connection, and they make your profile 3D. All of a sudden, you're a human being. You have these stories and these feelings and these experiences, and you're not just a static profile. So the way I share my divorce story is very simple. I share one sentence about it. I was the last person to know about my divorce in 2018. And then I don't say anything else. I immediately turn it toward, that was the catalyst for me starting my business. But just sharing that little detail, that they can, take the implications that it was obviously not a joyful time in my life. It was not something I initiated. It was very painful. But the result is this glorious resurrection of a part of my career that I never imagined, and then quickly turn it into 3 lessons I learned or five ways that informed me about business, or I would not be here if it weren't for that. And this is why this makes me 10 times better as a ghostwriter. So it's just sharing that headline, saving the copy and the emotion, allow them to infer the emotion there, right? Because the emotion it's a very emotive statement. Because my inbox flooded with single moms. Hey, thank you. Thank you. And you might be asking, if you're listening, you might be asking, well, how is that going to help me in the job market? Well, there's this thing called the algorithm, and like it or not, she has an opinion. And when your posts get more reach, then when you get increasingly more direct messages, and when people are commenting more and engaging with you more, even if they're not your ICP, ideal client profile, in your case, a hiring manager, a CEO, it pushes your post up. And the more eyes that get on your post, the more likely you are to be in the room with someone who wants to hire you. And so we share these stories. I do it once a week, Lauren.
This is really critical, because I'm sure that this will not be a shocker to you, right? A lot of folks, especially at a professional level, they think, I don't want to write content. If I do, I don't know what to write about. And number 3 is, I might be feeling like, not just what can I say or what can I add, but I'm feeling kind of raw right
Yep.
now.
Yep.
And I am also putting myself or taking away the hand that might be feeding me, because this is how it works. And for us at Portfolio Rocket, where we are really focusing in on the hidden job market, and a lot of our clients get plucked from comments, and they start developing their own relationships with people that they are following through comment threads and other related areas, or being found from their profiles. I just don't know where you're going to find a captive audience of 1 billion people with a couple of tweaks here and there. So yeah, you can fight it, but don't knock it till you try it, because this thing might mean you pocket your pride for a little bit in order to actually see the traction that you are raising your hand for, right? Because those two things are, you can't have them both. Is that true?
And that's my story. For 2 years, I sat jealous, resentful, whiny, making excuses for why my profile wasn't like fill in the blanks, right? The person 5 steps ahead of me, or making excuses for why this wouldn't work for me because I'm not selling X, Y, or Z, or I'm not trying to do X, Y. So I just sat resentful, jealous, like a big fat baby for 2 years. And then I just said, I'm tired of this. The I can figure this out, right? Like I am what so there's this mindset that I have, and it's the why not me mindset, because we get caught in the why me mindset so often, and that is a self-limiting mindset beyond any other probably that I've encountered personally and in working with clients. Is the why me, why this happened, why did I get fired, why am I the one that got laid off, why am I the one, why am I, why me. And so I started saying, why not me? Why not me? I'm relatively educated. I've been writing, for a long, long time. Surely I can figure this out. And for the people listening, you can figure this out with Lauren's coaching and help, especially. She has got this thing dialed in herself. But I started thinking, why not me? So I went and looked at the big creators, and I didn't look at what they're doing now, because what they're doing now is not how they got there. I did a deep dive. I should have been in the FBI, Lauren. I missed my calling, because I can get a good stalk on like you would not believe. So I did a deep dive for like all the way back to some of their earliest posts where their engagement was the same as mine. And at this time, my engagement was about 1,000 impressions a post, about 10 comments a post. And I would get trickle leads. I call them trickle leads because it would be like one a month, one decent one every 3 months. And so I stalked them all the way back to where I could tell they were only getting about 10 comments. And I reverse engineered everything that they did. And I said, okay, here are the systems to scale LinkedIn. And it is very scalable. Did I do some things that I promised at one point that I would never do, such as share selfies? Because like many of you listening, I told myself, I'm a professional. I'm an agented New York Times selling best ghostwriter. And I know if I share my selfie, it will diminish that professionalism and diminish my credentials and make me look like I'm just trying to sell an image and not a skill. And now I share with a selfie every single day, because you know why? The algorithm likes a picture. But beyond that, people hire people, people buy from people. And because my face is so connected to my content, and this doesn't have to be, I talk about selfies. These could be professional headshots, professional photos, or even just really nice photos that a friend or family member is willing to take for you. Grab a $15 ring light off of Amazon. There's a trillion. You can take them yourself if you're uncomfortable with somebody else. Take 1,000 until you find 5 or 6 you like, and just rotate them. But the truth is, I said, I will never post with a selfie. I am a professional writer. And now I post with selfies every day. And I did have to pocket some ego, right? I had to get over myself. I tell many of my clients, like, it's probably time we just get over ourselves, right? Because this is what works. And it goes deeper than the algorithm. It goes to the heart of what makes people buy or hire. And that's feeling like someone has a solution to your problem. And if you just post, we know posts with attachments do 10 times better. That's what the numbers say, 10 times better than posts without attachments. And so that's why I really do ask my clients to share with an attachment. I always share with an attachment unless I accidentally leave it off when I schedule it, which I've done before. I believe in the 80-20 rule of perfection here. Get it right 80% of the time. The other 20%, you got to let life do life. But yeah, there are things that I had to get over and overcome because LinkedIn is not like Facebook. It's not like any other social media site. It's different. And what sets it apart, and it's changing, right? It's becoming even more deeply relational than it was before. And a lot of people get uncomfortable with that because they're uncomfortable with connecting relationships with work. But really, that's how it should be all along because we're people, serving each other, providing services, goods, and products for each other. And LinkedIn's really done a good job of preserving the professionalism, but still encouraging the community and relationship factor.
So one of the things, I know I get this a lot. I'm sure you do too, right? Like, I'm professional, right? I'm professional. What you were saying just a second ago, I'm professional. So showing pictures of myself, and then if you want to really turn the dial up, video. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because earlier this week, another one of your posts blew up, shocker. And what it was talking about is understanding the value of video. Now, I want to just do a quick 2-second shout out to video. And this is another one of those things. If you want responses, do video, and do video in your emails. You can use Loom. It's free. It's amazing. You'll get like a near instant response. If you want to also play with the players, and I don't mean players, I mean just the people that are hanging out on LinkedIn, and see that progress sooner rather than later, know what it likes so that you can come with good snacks. And part of those good snacks are videos. And so can you just share a little bit
Yep.
for those who may be feeling extra brave and going and ready for like I'm all in, I'm doing this, I'm not taking no for an answer, I'm going to get hired, I'm going to get found, I'm going to get hired by the end of this year. Because if you haven't noticed it yet, we are like in third quarter right now.
Yep.
And peak hiring season is coming up in September, October. So no time like the present if you're feeling like, let's go.
Yep. So I had a conversation with Luke Matthews, who is one of the biggest creators on LinkedIn, a few weeks back. He booked a call. I wasn't sure what it was about. He basically just wanted to know what I had been noticing about LinkedIn. And we both came to the call with the same answer. It's that LinkedIn is prioritizing and pushing video content. There's a few ways we know this is true. One, there's a beta feature for some users on LinkedIn that is sort of like the Reels feature or even the Stories feature on Facebook and Instagram, but it's pushing just video content. Now, this is a beta feature. Not everybody has it. I don't have access to it, which makes me so mad. But when they're testing something, that's something that they're thinking about, that's in their wheelhouse, that they care about. And so the algorithm is going to prioritize those posts. And Luke told me on that call, he said, I did 3 videos this week that blew up massively. He said, I was just walking down the street talking to my phone, and then I just posted it. He said, over the content that I've curated, right, that I've painstakingly thought through and written out, these videos are crushing it. And I have noticed the same thing. I started testing video content about 7 months ago and started doing a video every Monday. And those posts had done in terms of my analytics, right? Because we're always looking at our numbers I recommend about every 30 days, but because I was posting only 4 a month, I waited until about 6 months to really look back. And what I saw was that even though the impressions and engagement were about the same, I was getting more people in my messages and in my email saying, saw your video, want to talk, saw your video, want a meeting, saw your video, I want to work with you. It's those videos that were triggering many of the reach outs that I was getting. And I saw this happen over the last 6, 7 months. And then even as recent as last week, my video content has begun to get a bigger and bigger and bigger reach. And that's LinkedIn pushing, that's math. The algorithm was tweaked to give more points to video content than any other type of content. And when you understand what the algorithm wants, it's very important. And you give it what it wants, it rewards you by putting you again in front of more people. And the goal isn't to be viral every time. You'll hear a lot of people talk about this, but I agree, it's not. You don't want to just write candy cane surface letter posts all the time. Sometimes though, you do want to go viral because that gives you exposure. So I try to write one viral post a week, but so far, the last couple of weeks, it's been my video days.
So again, shout out to video. And if you are like, do not pass go, you are like serious and you're done. Listen, it's free, it's fun. And guess what? It also engages people and people want to connect with you. And one of the things that you talk about when I say you want to connect with you, I would just love it. Love it, love it, love it. I'm doing my little like hand heart. If you would talk about this area that you touched on earlier about being the underdog and how much people want to root for you on LinkedIn. Because one of the other challenges that I think most people show up, at least if they are maybe laid off or they've been part of a reduction in force, is that there may be some shade of shame that is coming there, and they're like, oh no, man, like I gotta go on LinkedIn, like that's like the purgatory of where people who are unemployed go, right? Like there's like this kind of perception that now I have to show up there, and how am I going to feel when my experience, and it sounds like, this is part of your turnaround story, is how much people are invested in your success.
So that's a great question. So I had an agent for many, many, many years. Wonderful. Loved her. In the end, it was just a relationship that had run its course. So I had a client, a very big client, who came to me around this time that I was feeling burnt out just in the big publishing world in general. And I had this client come to me and say, hey, I want to build something big and fast. Can you give me 40 hours a month or 40 hours a week? I'm sorry, 40 hours a week for the next year. I said, sure, but can I give you 30 because I want to still be in the ghostwriting world, still be in that space. That's an anchor for me. But I said, I'll give you 30 hours a week for a year. Well, 3 months in to that contract, he just vanished. He went and bought a big company out in China and was flying back and forth and realized he didn't want to build something new. He wanted to improve on something that existed, which was his prerogative. And so my need for LinkedIn to work for me went from, I was building for 3 months and then it went to like red button panic mode, like Mayday, Mayday, I need this to work. Should I just go try to get a 9 to 5? Should I just go be a CMO somewhere? There were a lot of things I was wondering, but I realized I really wanted to build something, to give it a shot, to build something for myself. And I'm very glad for the little investments I made on LinkedIn over the years. But even if you haven't made those investments, the platform is so much bigger now than it was when I came to it, even in 2021. They weren't projected to cross the billion mark until mid 2025, and we crossed that Q1 this year. So it's growing incredibly rapidly. And so it's easy for you to start sharing. And a lot of people ask, like, what should my first post be? Should I introduce myself? Should I say, this is my first post? That's fine if you want to, but you can also just lead with a value add. No one's going to say, she didn't do an introduction post. He didn't do an introduction post. That's really weird. We think people are incredibly aware, acutely aware of our posts, but if they like it, they'll remember us and remember our names and faces. And then the next time they see us, that like and awareness will grow. Every time they see us in their feed, that like and awareness grows. But as for the particulars, they're probably not going to remember the particulars of many of your posts other than your big stories that you share over time and what value you add. They'll be like, hey, I want to go to Lauren's page because she is the person who's sharing all of these hiring stats and data and what hiring managers are looking for right now or what CEOs are looking for right now. So she's become a destination for those type of people because that's the value that she adds. So when you're coming to LinkedIn and you're like, I thought it was where resumes went to die up until 2021. And then I came and joined the party and I was like, wow, like people are having fun here. This is not your grandma's LinkedIn anymore. But I understand that hesitance to sort of share like, hey, I'm open to network. You know, there's a lot of debate and I don't even know, Lauren, what your thoughts are on putting the open. Have you seen the open to
I,
hire?
so yeah, I get asked this question too.
Yeah.
Not a
What's your thought?
fan, not a
I'm not
fan,
a fan either.
not a fan for anybody who is, past a manager role. And the reason
Agreed.
for that is, please, goodness gracious, please let them know you for what you talked about, which is value, not that you're available. You're not standing on a street corner and you're not just looking for a job.
Could
You're
not
you're
agree more.
you are a valued contributor and or transformer for that next company. And so I do
Yep.
think that is a place to drive people. And one of the things that I this is going on in my head is having your name become a destination so
Yeah.
that people know, oh, that Holly, I can associate her with this. I can talk to her about that. So owning what those, and part of that is 5% differentiators, but also somebody who is on top of, and this is why the two biggest areas for job seekers, this is crazy. When to increase your price point, one of the key areas is thought leadership. And when they talk about thought leadership, what I love about this so much, I'm almost doing a backflip, is they're not talking about white papers, for goodness sakes. They're not saying,
No.
oh,
Woo.
go out there and have your dissertation and, break that down. They're saying, tell me something about the industry. Tell me something that's important about the industry, and tell me something about yourself and how you think. So those are pretty basic, and anyone can do that. You can do this. And I want you
Yes.
to know, whether you're an executive or whether you are somebody that is just coming into the job market, especially if you've been out for a long period of time, because many of our executives think exactly the way you just described it. Oh, this is where resumes go to die. Why would I, go ahead and do this? And so I'd like to turn the conversation over to your August course and
Oh,
talk
you're
to
too
us
kind.
about
Lauren, can I
who,
add one more piece of value?
please, please.
So, when it comes to those labels that open to network, open to hire, looking for work, I don't even know what they are. What I recommend for anyone listening for your banner and your headline, and this is what I teach in my course that Lauren is so graciously about to plug for me, is to, in the absence of absolute acute clarity, you're going to want to cast a very wide but strong net up top. And then in your content, and I think, Lauren, this is part of what your question was, and I didn't answer it very well, is in your content, acknowledging that you're in between jobs, you can still do that from a position of strength. Hey, I moved on from this position, or this position, it was time, it came to an end. And here's where I am now. Here's what I'm learning. Here's how I'm growing. Here's what like the vision that I'm casting for my future. You can still share. So you niche down in content. And that even applies to you in a job seeking role, and saying maybe once a week mention it. It certainly does not need to become the one string on your banjo, right? Because that's depressing over time. And that would be true for any one single thing. It would just be redundant. So I would recommend sharing maybe once a week a lesson that you're learning in between jobs, a lesson that you learned leaving a job you thought you'd never leave. You can position that truth in that way so that people do know, if they did want to hire you, that you are pluckable.
Mhm.
But Also understanding that in that headline and banner, go with your biggest, cast the widest net up there. Not so that, people are looking to hire you for a LinkedIn ghostwriting job, right? But just so that people would understand sort of your background and history, and it reflects where you want to go. But I agree with Lauren. I do not love those. I think are they called filters for your profile?
It's a frame, and it's called open
Frame, that's what
source.
it's called. I don't even
Yeah.
know what they're called. Don't use them.
Yeah, don't
Niche
use it.
down in your content.
Talk to us about your course, because
Okay.
it's like happening like in a couple
It is.
weeks.
It is August 13th, Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And Lauren, you are in the course, and you're in my current course. We have 2 more weeks together. It has been the most life-giving thing I've done in my career. I would put it over interviewing celebrities, professional athletes in my previous life of being a big pub ghostwriter, but it has brought so much life to me and the people in the group. 2 things that I didn't see coming. There's 6 group sessions, right? And it's a very comprehensive LinkedIn strategy. No matter where you're at on LinkedIn, you can find me in every week. And that's how I designed it. This is where I unpack those hundreds of hours of research and reverse engineering the greats on LinkedIn and their strategies and the systems that I wrapped around that. And so there's 6 weeks where we unpack that as a group. Then I opened office hours at the end of my week for one-on-ones with the class participants. I did not see it coming, how much I would love that and look forward to that, and how beneficial it would be to the group members. The second thing I didn't see coming was the value of the community. We have a Telegram thread that we're all on, and it's, we're talking all the time. We're talking 7 days a week. Of course, it's not mandatory, but it does give you, especially if you're in the middle of a job search, it gives you community. And that might be something that you are really missing right now. And it's given a lot of people in that group a new community. One of the members, Macy Willis, who is phenomenal, she texted me last night and said, I did not realize how much I needed community. I thought I had community, but I needed this. I needed this community. And I'm strategic about who I allow in the group, right? So there might be people that I try to connect the group members early on. I was trying to make connections, and Lauren, you've even had calls with other group members, but it's also a great networking opportunity. So yes, we're starting August 13th and it runs through September 17th, Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. All the classes will be
linked below so that you guys get all the information and register. But I do want to do a quick shout out to that course, because in all truth, I have a lot of communities, but not like this. I have a lot of communities, and what I've really enjoyed is, and I use this same kind of thinking with my own groups, is it kind of lubricates the muscles that may have atrophied to be a better networker, right? To get into the habit of asking people about them, supporting them, learning about them, because pretty much every day I'm on somebody else's content, and I've become increasingly more interested in who they are, what they are. And so this isn't just for people who are, looking to be content creators. It's for anyone who really wants to maximize their impact and their writing on LinkedIn. So Holly Crawshaw,
thank you.
I cannot. I just wish that I could give you a big squeeze right now, but I'll give you one online. And thank you so much. Please, for all of you crazy cats who hung around and continued to listen, you notice I put the cats in there. Make sure that you leave a review for us, please. It would mean the world to us. This podcast is growing, and part of it is because of you. So please keep adding in your reviews and telling us what you like and what you don't like, what you want more of, or what you want, who you want to have come on the show. We would love to hear from you. So with that, we're signing off. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now. and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.